Maryland basketball can win the Big Ten this year.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And I'm also doing work at InsideBlackandGold.net. So make sure you guys head over to Inside Black and Gold for all your latest Terps news. And today's episode is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I think that Maryland basketball absolutely has more than an opportunity to be able to win the Big Ten this year. I know a lot of talk has been about football, but I wanted to mix in a podcast here to give us a real kind of preseason basketball vibe right before we get the games going. And believe it or not, Maryland basketball has a game next week. So I've been waiting to do a couple of these. And I know a lot of you guys are huge Maryland basketball fans, and this is what you care about even more than football. So I wanted to make sure I talked about it. And November 4th, we have a game against Manhattan, in a game where obviously expected to win, a game that we should honestly win by a lot of points. But I want to talk about our overall landscape of the year. And I think we're a team that absolutely can win the Big Ten. I think we have the guys. I think we have the personnel. I think we have everything we need to be able to make a real run at winning the Big Ten. And obviously winning the Big Ten means that you're a March Madness team and probably a pretty high seed, definitely a pretty high seed if you win the Big Ten. But I think that a lot of people think we're kind of a middle-ish type of team this year in the Big Ten. A lot of people think that we can surprise people. A lot of people are high on us, but I don't think people realize just how good this team is. And I think the Big Ten is more open than a lot of people think. I think that there's not a clear team in this conference this year that's like, oh, you point to them and be like, oh, they're a team that is going to win it, or oh, they're a team that should probably win it. I think last year you thought Illinois, you thought Purdue. I thought those two teams were definitely the top two teams in the conference. And the Big Ten's always deep with plenty of good talent. But I think that we have as much ability and as much talent as just about anybody in this conference. I don't know if everyone knows it yet, what we did this offseason, but I really do think that Maryland basketball can win the Big Ten this year and get back to those types of days where we were near the Big Ten. And I know last year was a huge drop-off. There were just way too many problems with that team. But I do believe that we have the personnel in terms of looking at what types of teams win in college basketball these days, what types of teams are able to win in March, what types of teams can win their conference. I think that we have all the personnel to be able to win, and I think that we have the guys. I think a lot of it's going to come down to Kevin Willard as a coach, but I do think we got to remember, year one, Kevin Willard did get us to a March Madness bid, and I know last year was bad, but I do think that Willard can really get us going in the right direction. And I think it will offset some of this sadness that's coming from the football season. Football season obviously hasn't been great, but I think I'm most excited for this basketball team because the talent we brought in terms of the portal, in terms of our freshmen, I think I have a really good shot at winning the Big Ten. But I think the number one thing that we have better this year than last year, we have guys that can shoot the ball. I think last year we didn't have any shooters. And when you look at college basketball and basketball today in general, you have to have guys that can shoot. If you don't have guys that can shoot, you're not going to win games. You're just not. We were the first-hand team to experience not being able to win games without guys that can shoot the ball. You got to be able to shoot the three ball in today's college basketball. And I think we brought in a bunch of guys that can shoot the three ball at a very high level. I think when you look at Selton Miguel, when you look at Jacoby Gillespie, when you look at Rodney Rice, all three of those guys shoot the ball at a really high level, and all those guys are going to play a lot of minutes for us. Last year, Selton Miguel shot 39% from three. That's a really solid percentage, and he's known as a guy that can shoot the ball really well. Jacoby Gillespie, I really like his overall game, but he shot the ball really well last year from three, shot 38.7%. Both guys would have been at the top of our team last year in shooting, and Rodney Rice as well. That's one of Rodney Rice's best part of his game is be able to shoot the ball. So we brought in three guys that can shoot the ball at a really high level, and then Chance Stevens also coming back after being out all last year, and we know he can shoot the ball really well. So I think that's a big reason why I think that we have a chance to win the Big Ten this year, because what we were worst at last year, what we absolutely had trouble doing last year was shooting the ball. And I think that Kevin Willard did a really good job of getting guys that can shoot the ball. But I also think that a lot of college basketball, and we saw it last year with a team like Purdue and a team like UConn, who had a really good big, and Purdue had Zach Edey and all those types of guys. A lot of those teams have really good big men, and we have two guys that I think potentially could be the best front court in college basketball. And I think that's probably one of the biggest reason, if not the biggest reason, why I believe we can win in the Big Ten. It's a guards game in the NBA, but in college basketball, a lot of it is still in the hands of the big man. If you have big men that can dominate, they can win a lot of games. Big reason why I think we have the opportunity to win the Big Ten, because we have big men that are as good as anybody in the conference. When you look at Derek Queen, the 5-star freshman, what he's going to be able to do down low with Julian Reese, I think is going to be special. And Derek Queen's going to come in right away and be one of the best players in the Big Ten. And the fact that he's going to be able to play with Julian Reese is going to be something that I think is really beneficial for both of those guys. And especially this year with better shooters around those two guys, and as well as those two guys will play a lot together, but also in terms of when we get into the flow of the game, they also will take breaks at different times, and they'll also get their opportunity to play alone. And so I think that's really beneficial. I think having two big men that can really both go get a bucket whenever you want to, the better big mans in the country, it's going to be really hard to stop. And it's one of the biggest reasons why I think Maryland could win the Big Ten this year. And I think this year we are so much deeper everywhere on our basketball team, and it's a lot less one player dominant. Last year, it was all Jameer Young. Nobody else could create a shot. Nobody else could get their own shot. Now I look at our entire starting lineup, and I see all guys that could potentially contribute, all guys that could average in the double digits, where last year we were just so unbalanced. Kevin Willard talked about it. We know Jacoby Gillespie, he's a shot creator. He's a playmaker. He can get his own shot. He can get to the rim. He can shoot the ball. He can get to the mid-range. He can do all those different things. And then Selton Miguel, he's a guy that won 6th man of the year in his conference, but he really wasn't you don't consider him a bench player. He was second on his team in minutes. And Kevin Willard has talked about how he's a guy that can get his own shot as well. He's said that in one of his press conferences, and he can shoot the lights out with it. And then Deshaun Harris-Smith, we hope he's worked on his shooting. And, of course, Julian and Derek Queen, when they're down low, those guys can get anything they want. But we also have guys coming off the bench that can get shots like Rodney Rice. Rodney Rice, he has the potential to be a really good scorer in the Big Ten. Jordan Geronimo, I think not in terms of shot creation, but in terms of having more depth, last year Geronimo was a guy that started for us. And now I think Geronimo is in a place where he gets to come off the bench. He doesn't have to play as many minutes, but I think he's going to be a really good player to rotate in with Queen and Julian Reese. We don't have to worry about him giving him starting minutes. If Chance Stevens comes back healthy, I talked about Rodney Rice. If he comes off the bench, I do think that there is a world where potentially Rodney Rice could be a better option with Gillespie and Selton Miguel in there, but we really don't know yet. We'll see. We also got the kid Terfara Gapari as well. He's another guy that can come in at the forward position. And it really sucks that we don't have Jahari Long. He was going to bring our depth to another option. Malachi Palmer, the freshman, he could get some minutes. Braden Pierce, the big man. We have so many different options where last year it felt really restricted. It felt like our bench wasn't great and our starting lineup wasn't great. I think we're a much more balanced team this year. And I think in terms of college basketball, I think that's really beneficial. So I think we shoot the ball really well. We were really good defensively, and I think we can be again. And then I think we're going to be I didn't even get to say all my points, but I think we're going to be a really good rebounding team with Queen and Julian Reese in there. And I think that we have way more depth as well. And I think that we're a much more balanced team, which I think will allow us to have a real opportunity to win the Big Ten this year. I talked about all the good things. What are my biggest concerns for Maryland basketball this year? Let's talk about that after this ad from the Gametime app. Have you ever wanted to go to a game at the last minute, like a Maryland Terrapins game, but finding tickets is hard? I have been there before. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Gametime has deals on tickets right to the start of an event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So I think we talked about all the good things, but what are the biggest concerns for Maryland basketball? Because it's not a perfect team by any means. I do think that there's a lot of really good players and that we have a lot of good guys in a lot of good spots, but I don't think it's a perfect team by any means. So what are the biggest concerns this year for basketball? Because I do think that we have some this year. I think my number one concern has to be in Kevin Willard. I think last year was definitely concerning because I thought that him as a coach just was purely not good enough. I didn't think he made enough adjustments during the season. I thought he stuck with some players too long. I just thought that he didn't try enough things to get back on track. A similar type of thing with Maryland football. I thought a lot of the stuff we were doing was broke. And there's a quote that is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if it's broke, you got to fix it. And it felt like we were broke in so many different areas. But I also think the way the roster was constructed, which is also partially on him for sure, but I think that people thought we'd be better than we actually were. But I thought the way the roster was constructed definitely hurt us as well. So I think this year it's a much better, more balanced team. Whereas last year, I was like, after a couple games, you realize that there was big problems to be had. But I think Kevin Willard this year, there's a lot of different pieces, a lot of new pieces, a lot more talent, I would say, a lot more balance this year. How does he control different things like the starting lineup? It doesn't have to stay the same all year. If a guy's not performing, you don't have to keep him in there. And also, I think just overall adjustments throughout the year. Can he make them? It's a different team, so figuring this team out might take a little bit. But once we get to Big Ten play, we're going to have things figured out. So I think that's something definitely that Kevin Willard needs to work on. And I think is a concern just based off of last year. But I know he can do it because I thought that 2 years ago, our team made March Madness in year one with Kevin Willard, and it was nowhere near as talented as this team is. I know I just talked about shooting, and we get a lot of shooters back, but I do think that Deshaun Harris-Smith is a concern to me. I think that the fact that I saw him shoot really poorly last year from three, it's a concern because I don't think that works in this year's lineup. We're three guards and more two big mans or two forwards this year, and it's less of like a 4-out. Last year, it felt like sometimes we could extend to more of a 4-out, but we're going to have Derek Queen and Julian Reese in a lot. And if a guy can't shoot, then it's going to hurt us because that's going to be a free double with those guys. So I think if Deshaun Harris-Smith's shot has improved, I'm not concerned. I think he's going to be a really good player for us this year. But if the shot hasn't gotten better, that's something that's really going to concern me because I think specifically this year with playing with two big men, I think you're going to have three guards out there that can shoot. And I feel like we have basically everyone that's playing and everyone on this roster, I feel like can shoot besides Deshaun Harris-Smith. From what I've seen, it was a really poorly shooting year last year, but I know he's worked on it nonstop with Kevin Willard. But it's definitely still a concern to me. I do think that it's a concern, and I do think it's something that I'm worrying about. I think another concern is it's also a positive, but a lot of positives can be concerns as well. I think it's Julian Reese and Derek Queen playing together. I think it works, but I've been wrong before. And there's been people to say that I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know how this is going to look. I don't know if this is going to work as well as a lot of people think it will. I think that when you put two big men together like that, it's not always the best for spacing and everything. But I do think people don't realize that Derek Queen can kind of extend outside the 3-point line and can do a lot of stuff there. I think it's going to work. But I do think there's some concerns with some of the spacing. How well will they play together? I do think there's something to be said for that, and I think it is somewhat of a concern. It's also a positive, but like I said, a lot of positives can be concerns as well, and can kind of go back and forth. So I do think that's a concern. I also think Jameer Young's production, losing him, I know we have a lot of really good guys to replace him, but he was by far our only offense last year. And replacing him is definitely something that is on my mind and something that matters. He's not an easy replacement at all. And what he did last year was honestly remarkable. And he was just stuck on a team that wasn't very good. And it's as simple as that. But I do think how well he plays or how well we replace him is a bit of concern just because he was above 20-point score and we got to replace that. And I think we do that with a bunch of different guys, which I think is much more balanced. But I do think that how productive will these guards be? We haven't really seen Selton or Jacoby in the Big Ten. So I think that leads to another thing, them playing in the Big Ten. How well will they adjust? Will they still be elite like a lot of people are predicting them to be? Or will suffer and not be as good, which can happen. I don't think that'll go like that, and I think that there's not a ton of pressure on those guys because you're going to run it through those big men, Queen and Julian Reese. Like that's going to be the game plan. Get it to those guys inside. But I do still think that there's somewhat of a concern when saying that these Selton and Jacoby could be our best two guards, and they haven't really played Big Ten ball yet. So I do think that's something to think about. But I do think that those guys are going to flourish, and I think a lot of those concerns are going to be gone pretty quickly. But I do think Kevin Willard and him making adjustments this year is a concern. I do think that Reese and Queen is a concern playing together. It is a positive, but it's a concern. As well as I think shooting is something that if it doesn't get better, we're going to have trouble winning games, especially with the two big man lineup. Who were the X factors this year for Maryland basketball that we aren't talking about enough? Who are the guys that potentially could lead us? I'll talk about that right now. I do think there's some X factors on this team that we don't talk about enough. And I think there's some guys that potentially could make impacts. I'm honestly not 100% yet because we haven't seen the rotation, but I do have a couple guys in mind. One guy I've talked about a lot that's going to be the biggest X factor in the year is Rodney Rice. I think he's really good. I'm really high on Rodney Rice, 4-star out of high school, a guy that we really wanted, attended DeMatha. Definitely a guy that as a scorer has big time tools. I think that he's a guy that we could look at the end of the year and be like, he's got to start, or he could be the best guy off the bench for us. There's a lot of different things you could look at when you look at Rodney Rice. I think he's a really good basketball player and he shoots the ball, but I think that a lot of people expect Selton, Gillespie, and Deshaun to trounce out there. And I think that Rodney Rice might go undercover a little bit just because he's coming off the bench, but could be playing similar minutes as those guys. But I think that he's a guy that's an X factor that could potentially push us over the top, push us to somewhere where we didn't know we could get to because we have this guard coming off the bench that I think I watched other teams in the Big Ten last year and I felt like they just have more guys, just had more dudes that could play at a high level. And I think that Rodney Rice is a guy that could potentially play at a high level and really help us out. So I do think he's a guy that could really be a good basketball player. And I do think he's a bit of an X factor. I think his scoring ability is X factor because honestly, when we got him, I was like, oh, plug and play guy that could play right away. And then we start getting these other guys, and I was like, And then I got reports he wasn't starting. I'm still not sure he shouldn't start over Deshaun, but we'll see how the season goes. We'll see what strides Deshaun made in scoring. I think another guy who redshirted last year, Braden Pierce, 7-foot kid from Georgia, gave him a redshirt year to get better. And I think that his size and his ability inside could be something that could help us this year. I'm unsure of his complete game. I'm unsure of how good he really is because I haven't seen him play in college. But I do think he's potentially somebody, if it's not this year, it's next year, but he could be a guy that's an X factor that could really help us in that big man rotation. I know we have Jordan Geronimo, but he's a guy with size. And if he is able to protect the rim and he's able to rebound, then he can find minutes on this team. If he's able to play good defense and rebound, you can find minutes. And that's really all you need from a backup big. And I think Willard will make the rotation so that Queen or Julian Reese is always in. So if you want to run these two big man lineups and continue to do those types of things, then Braden could be a guy that could be in the rotation. I'm not exactly sure, but I do think he's a potential X factor that not a lot of people talk about. I don't really talk about, but I do think it's someone that sneaky could give us some minutes and could end up being a lot better than a lot of people think, and a guy that could make an impact this year for us. We'll see how much he's learned from a redshirt freshman year. I do think he needed that, and I do think that that's something that's important for a guy like that. But I do think he was kind of a late bloomer, but I do think a guy with that kind of height in size. And I saw him play in high school some, and I was like, this kid looks pretty good. He's definitely a guy that could help us this year and be a guy that we don't talk about, but could really have a chance to do some things this year. Another X factor I really think is Chance Stevens. Because of his shooting ability, I think we missed him last year. I think he would have a chance to be in the rotation last year because we needed a guys that could shoot. And I think Chance Stevens could bring us that this year. I think especially when we talk about Queen, and I keep talking about Queen and Reese inside, I think that Stevens could give us a really good opportunity to space the floor, to give those guys space to work inside. And if they double, a guy like Chance Stevens could be really helpful to be able to kick out to. He was injured all last year, so not a lot of people are thinking about him, but I do think that he's a guy that can really help this team and really do some big things. I don't know with the guard rotation. It'll be interesting to see how deep we go. I think early season in some of these, they're not exhibition games, but some of these games that we clearly should win, Kevin Willard probably will go pretty deep. But as the season starts, I wonder, will it be 8-man rotation, 2 guards, 1 big man coming off the bench and kind of rotate there? Will he get to 9? Will he get to 10? I don't know, but I do think that could depend on how much of an X factor some of these guys are. Then Malachi Palmer as well, the freshman, heard good things about him. But I'm excited for basketball season. I'm glad I got to talk about it today. I think it's a good kind of to know that we have a team that has a real chance to be a really good team coming up, because football season it's just been like, you guys know how it feels, because a lot of it we're outmatched and it's just not much you can do. But basketball, we have the guys. We have everything we can to win the Big Ten. So I'm excited to watch that. And I think we have concerns, obviously, like I talked about. But I think this team has a lot of good stuff going on. I think has a chance to be a really good team this year. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.